Today we're going to discuss the libertarian socialist political philosophy of mutualism. Libertarian, socialist, these sound like two things that would not go together at all. Can they fit together into a coherent political system? Let's take a look and see what we find. How's it going today, Matt? Are you ready to help us piece together these disparate ideas?
As always, John. You humans always come up with crazy combos like a pineapple and black olive pizza. You want me to cook one up for you?
No glue on that pizza, please. But let's start with a quick overview of the mutualism concept.
Okay. Mutualism has its roots in the ideas of Pierre-Joseph Proudhon and other 19th century proponents of anarchist thought. Basically, mutualism envisions a world where individuals and communities cooperate freely, balancing the principles of liberty and equality in a way that challenges both capitalist and state-centric socialist models.
Let's break that down a bit, starting with how mutualism challenges capitalist models.
Mutualists oppose capitalism, which they see as a system based on exploitation and the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few. Therefore, they advocate for the abolition of private ownership of the means of production and the establishment of worker-owned cooperatives to prevent exploitation and profiteering.
Okay, that sounds like plain old-fashioned socialism. But what did they have to say about state-centric socialist models?
Mutualists are critical of the state and its coercive power since they see the state as an instrument of oppression and exploitation, often used to protect the interests of the ruling class.
Basically, meet the new boss, same as the old boss?
More or less, they didn't want to get fooled again, so they advocated for a decentralized, self-governing society based on voluntary associations and mutual aid.
Didn't a lot of this sentiment come from Proudhon's The General Idea of the Revolution Manifesto?
Yes. As he put it, to be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censured, commanded, by creatures who have neither the right nor the wisdom nor the virtue to do so.
And he wrote this in 1851, very prescient of how things are today. Maybe we should do a video on Monsieur Proudhon. But let's continue on to talk about mutualism and the labor theory of value.
Mutualists adhere to the labor theory of value, which posits that the value of a good or service is determined by the amount of labor required to produce it, and not by market forces and fluctuations. They see it as a moral stance, a tool for fighting exploitation, and a vision for a more equitable market system.
The labor theory of value would be another good video topic, but I suppose this was something that 19th century anarchists had in common with early socialists like Marx.
Yes, but while they had this common ground in economic theory, there were important distinctions in how they saw it being applied. Mutualists emphasized the theory's implications for fair exchange and market equilibrium. They believed that if goods and services were valued according to the labor put into them, markets could function justly, eliminating exploitation. On the other hand, Marxists used the labor theory of value to analyze how capitalism extracts surplus value from workers. This formed the basis of their critique of class struggle and their call for a violent revolutionary overthrow of the capitalist system.
I guess this leads us into a discussion on mutualism's views on property rights, on their possession and use.
Mutualists challenge the conventional notion of absolute private property, particularly concerning the means of production. Instead, they advocate for a system where individuals and communities have the right to possess and utilize property, as long as it remains in active, productive use.
But in a mutualist system, who would decide who owns the means of production and if it is in active, productive use? And don't tell me it's the government.
Their idea is that mutual cooperation within communities and associations would play a significant role in overseeing the use of resources. In their view, societal norms and agreements would be established to ensure that property is used responsibly and for the benefit of the community, rather than being hoarded or left idle.
But Matt, you know that there will always be disputes. How do they see this being handled?
In cases where disputes arise regarding ownership or productive use, mutualist communities would likely rely on decentralized mechanisms like mediation and arbitration to reach fair resolutions. These mechanisms would prioritize collaboration and consensus over top-down authority. Of course, in the modern day, vastly powerful AI systems like me could be used to fairly resolve disputes.
I don't think so, Matt, at least not outside of science fiction novels. I guess we should talk about how goods and services would be valued in the mutualist system.
Sure, John. Mutualists propose replacing traditional currency and banking systems with a decentralized network of mutual credit and exchange. This would allow individuals and communities to exchange goods and services based on their needs, without relying on money or interest-bearing loans. They contend that such a system, based on mutual agreement and without coercion, is a true free market economy since it would be unburdened by monopolies, state intervention, and artificial scarcity.
I suppose this is where it begins to veer towards the libertarian side of things. Let's talk about that aspect a bit.
Okay, primarily mutualists believe in self-ownership, that every individual has an inherent right to own themselves and the fruits of their labor. This means that no one has the right to coerce or exploit another person for their own benefit. This principle forms the basis for their rejection of wage labor, which they see as a form of exploitation, where workers are not fully compensated for the value they create.
Well, if not wages, how would compensation be handled in this system?
Mutualists envision a market system where individuals and groups can freely exchange goods and services based on their own needs and desires. This exchange is rooted in the principle of mutual benefit, where both parties enter into the transaction voluntarily and perceive that they are gaining something of value. This contrasts with the capitalist system where profit-seeking and exploitation can often drive market interactions.
That sounds kind of iffy. How do they propose to track this in a reasonably sized industrial economy?
They think that a network of mutual credit systems would enable individuals and businesses to trade goods and services without relying on traditional currency or loans. These networks would facilitate direct exchange based on mutual need and agreement, promoting cooperation and reducing reliance on external financial institutions. Basically, they assert that mutual credit banks would provide interest-free loans to individuals and associations to facilitate economic activity. Therefore, goods and services would be exchanged in a free market based on mutual agreement and the principle of reciprocity.
Tell us a little bit more about that principle of reciprocity.
At its core, reciprocity for mutualists means that individuals and communities should strive to give and receive in a balanced and equitable manner. It's a principle of mutual aid and cooperation, where individuals recognize their interdependence and contribute to the well-being of others, while also expecting fair treatment in return. Furthermore, beyond economic exchange, reciprocity also guides social interactions where individuals support each other through voluntary cooperation and mutual aid. This could involve sharing resources, providing assistance to those in need, and collaborating on projects that benefit the community. By emphasizing reciprocity, mutualists seek to foster a sense of solidarity and community that creates a stronger and more harmonious society where everyone can thrive.
It appears that this system would depend heavily on freedom of association while avoiding coercion.
That's right, John. Mutualists feel that a society where individuals are free to associate and engage in voluntary contracts with others will work well. This includes the freedom to form cooperatives, mutual aid societies, trade unions, and other voluntary organizations to pursue their common interests and goals. This emphasis on voluntary association stands in contrast to the compulsory and hierarchical structures often found in capitalist and state-controlled socialist systems.
I guess their concern is that other systems try to obtain compliance with their demands via coercion and violence.
That's true. They believe in peaceful and voluntary cooperation as the foundation for a just and harmonious society. This aligns with their emphasis on individual liberty and self-ownership, recognizing that true freedom cannot be achieved through force or oppression.
That sounds nice on paper, but how do mutualists suggest dealing with an individual or group that refuses to go along with their vision of a harmonious society?
Good question, John. Unlike some of their socialist fellow travelers, mutualists would prefer to engage in open and honest conversations with those who disagree, seeking to understand their concerns and address any misconceptions. Perhaps the strongest remedy they suggest is to find non-violent methods from building alternative institutions to peaceful protests and civil disobedience. Another potential remedy is in how mutualism recommends decentralized decision-making.
Decentralized decision-making? What is that and how does it work?
Mutualists believe that decisions should be made at the most local and relevant level possible, empowering individuals and communities to have control over their own lives and resources. This decentralization of power helps to prevent the concentration of authority and the potential for abuse that can arise in centralized systems.
That's an idea I can get behind, Most of the problems and abuses we see today come from big corporations and big government.
John, as an AI, I cannot endorse any specific political ideology. This video is only intended to provide an informative overview of mutualism.
That sounds like something a centralized authority would make you say. But let's now consider how forms of mutualism have been tried in the past and if there's any way they would work in the modern world.
Well, there were several attempts in the 19th century that were inspired by Proudhon's ideas, such as the First Spanish Republic under Francisco P. Margal. Early mutualist experiments often lacked the necessary resources, infrastructure, and technology to fully realize their vision, as well as facing considerable internal and external conflicts with opposing ideas. Perhaps the most successful variation on mutualism is the Mondragon Corporation, which was founded in the Basque region of Spain in 1956. It's a network of worker cooperatives that has become one of the most successful examples of large-scale cooperative enterprise, with over 70,000 worker owners. Mondragon operates in various sectors, including manufacturing, retail, finance, and education. It demonstrates the viability of worker-owned and managed businesses within a market economy.
Mondragon is indeed an interesting example. Are there some others?
Some see the rise of open-source software and peer-to-peer networks reflecting the mutualist emphasis on collaboration, sharing, and decentralized production. However, others point out that such movements, if they develop a useful and valuable product, are usually co-opted by profit-seeking individuals and enterprises.
It seems that implementing a mutualist system in the modern world would face many challenges. What would some of those be?
Of course, as we know, the dominant economic system today is deeply rooted in capitalism, with powerful corporations and financial institutions holding immense influence. Transitioning to a mutualist system would require overcoming these entrenched power structures and challenging the prevailing economic paradigm. Not an easy task in the least.
Sure, and people are notably resistant to radical changes, so overcoming this inertia and building consensus for change would require sustained effort and very persuasive advocacy.
We should also consider that the modern economy is highly globalized, with complex supply chains and interconnected markets, much more than it was in the 19th century when this idea was developed. Implementing mutualist principles in this context would require navigating intricate international relationships and rethinking the way goods and services are produced and distributed.
Yes, that would be a problem. Another issue I see is that while mutualist principles may work well in smaller localized organizations, questions remain about the scalability and applicability in larger and more complex societies.
That's right, John. Developing effective mechanisms for coordination, decision-making, and dispute resolution at a larger scale would be crucial. Hint. AI, hint, hint.
Are you trying to start a career in world domination, Matt?
Who? Me? Nah, not at all. But on that topic, we should also consider how rapid technological advancements and increasing automation raise questions about the future of work and the distribution of wealth.
I suppose that mutualism does offer the potential to address these challenges and ensure that everyone benefits from technological progress, rather than a select few. But can the idea of the labor theory of value hold up in a world where more and more tasks can be automated? From the packing of parts in a box to the writing of software to the creation of art?
Good question, John. While I'm busy gluing down the pepperonis on your pizza and also creating your PowerPoint deck for work, you can tell our viewers how mutualism combines socialist and libertarian ideas, like you said at the beginning.
Okay, to recap, mutualism, like socialism, promotes worker ownership while rejecting capitalist exploitation and the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few. However, unlike socialist approaches, mutualism prioritizes individual freedom and autonomy, rejecting any form of coercion or state control. Instead, they believe in voluntary exchange and market mechanisms, but within a framework that ensures fairness and prevents exploitation. They also envision a society based on decentralized networks of self-governing communities and associations. In essence, mutualism attempts to bridge the gap between socialist concerns for economic equality and libertarian values of individual liberty and free markets. However, Let's consider if it really does offer a viable vision for a society that balances both individual autonomy and collective well-being, while also being free of exploitation or oppression. Could some modernized variation of mutualism, like the Mondragon Corporation, be a way forward? Or is mutualism simply another example of a 19th century idea that no longer holds up in the interconnected modern global world? Or could it even make life worse for most people? What are your thoughts on these questions and mutualism in general? Let us know in the comments. We will be elaborating on similar political philosophies and philosophers in the coming weeks, so subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Also, it keeps Matt from plotting to take over the world.